Hello students, welcome to your channel Sabish English Classes. I hope you all are good there. And what I have picked up today is the book Reverie, which is from ISC board for the students of 11th as well as 12th standard. And the poem that I'm going to take up today is the fifth poem from this book, that is Crossing the Bar. And it has been written by Alfred Lord Tennyson. So we must understand something about the poet first of all. So Alfred Lord Tennyson was a British Victorian poet. So we must understand that being a poet in the Victorian era, he must have got the thought that was prevailing in the Victorian era. And the most prominent thought that was prevailing in the Victorian era was pertaining to faith in God. And as far as Tennyson is concerned, he also had a great faith in God. And it is being reflected in this particular poem very well. So, Crossing the Bar was written in 1889 by Tennyson. And at that point of time, Tennyson was 80 years old and he was also suffering from some disease. So, it was very clear to the poet that he was about to die soon. And he had died in 1892, that is after 3 years. So, this particular poem was regarded as the last poem of his life by the poet, and for that reason, he had always made this request to his son that in his anthology or a collection of poems that get published, he wanted this particular poem to be published at last in that collection, so as to reflect that this was the last poem of his life. Because this poem has got something related to that which is actually reflecting something about the last moment of life. And this poem is metaphorical, like the title of the poem, Crossing the Bar, itself is metaphorical. That means there is a figure of speech used which is called metaphor. Now, what is metaphor here in this particular title is bar. And rather, the entire phrase crossing the bar is metaphorical in its meaning. Now, how? Bar is actually referring to the sandbar, and we must understand first of all very clearly what is a sandbar. So sandbar is nothing but an accumulation of sand in the middle of the of a particular river. It happens कि आपके इस साइड भी रिवर होगा, इस साइड भी रिवर होगा, बट बीच में कुछ रेत सा जमा हो जाएगा. There will be an accumulation of sand in the mid of a river. So वो जो है वो जो bar है, that accumulation of sand, it is called sandbar. And the poet is talking about crossing that particular sandbar. That means that the poet is talking about crossing that particular sandbar to reach what? That water of the river. So here we have to understand that that particular water body, that water of the river, is actually referring to death metaphorically. And crossing the sandbar means crossing this life so as to move towards death. So the poet is talking about crossing the bar, that means moving from life to death. So this is how the poet has talked about his death in this poem. And what is different about this poem is, although it is an elegy just because the poem is discussing death, yet the poem is very positive and optimistic in its tone, just because the poet is not at all sad about his death. Rather, he is happy and celebrating and very eagerly waiting for that moment when he would die. So he is embracing his death with a happy heart and with a welcoming heart, just because the poet isn't scared of death, but rather, being a true Christian and being a person who had great faith in God, he was rather excited to meet God after his death. So He is not only thinking about his death but also life after death. And by thinking about that life after death, he is getting motivated to die. So, what happens in this poem? Let us start and see. This crossing the bar. So here this poem is very very small. First of all, it is just in 4 stanzas, 16 lines. It is very easy as well, but the only thing that we need to understand that almost every line is metaphorical from the title to the entire poem. So now we have to understand that the poet is happy and very excitedly waiting for his death and is going to welcome death just because he is excited to meet his God. Let us start the poem now. Sunset and evening star. Now, this particular line is again metaphorical because this particular line is talking about sunset and evening star, and sunset is like the day coming to an end, and evening star refers to Venus. Here, in this particular line, sunset and evening star both are actually referring to the old age of the poet. That means now the life is about to get over, as the sunset and evening star are the indications that the day is about to get over. In the same manner, an old age of a person is an indication for the person that his life is about to get over. So here the poet is understanding that as a matter of fact, and he is saying, and one clear call for me. That means it is an indication for me, and I'm very well understanding as a fact that now my days, my life is about to get over, and now it's time for me to welcome death, and may there be no mourning of the part. And the poet is making this request to his son and to his all the dear ones that when he dies, see, because all of us know it very well that death is that particular term which is related to, which is associated with grief and sorrow. Just because nobody gets happy when somebody dies, all the dear ones cry and they always miss that person who dies. But here, in advance itself, the poet has made this request to his dear ones that when I am gonna die, when I die, when I'm crossing the bar, that means when I'm moving from life towards death, there should be no mourning, there should be no sorrow, there shouldn't be any lamentation or grief um, among my people, my dear ones. When I put out to sea, that means when I begin my journey towards the sea, that means when I die. And when I start moving, when I am heading towards my God, towards the heaven, where I can meet my God, where I can get in face to face with Him. So, the poet in this particular stanza is telling us that he was very well aware of the fact that his death was imminent, and that he was also happy and very excited for that, and therefore he made a request beforehand that at the time of his death there shouldn't be any lamentation or mourning or crying and all. Then in the second stanza the poet is saying, but such a tide as moving seems asleep, too full for sound and foam, when that which drew from out the boundless deep turns again home. So, in the second stanza, the poet has described that tide which he wants for himself to come and carry him towards the heaven. He is saying, but such a tide as moving seems asleep. मतलब एक ऐसी लहरें आए पोएट को ले जाने के लिए हेवन की तरफ, जो जब आए तो ऐसा लगे जैसे वो सो रही हैं, इतनी खामोश लहरें हो वो, उन लहरों में कोई भी आवाज़ ना हो, शोर शराबा ना हो, बहुत खामोशी हो, सन्नाटा हो, ऐसी टाइड हो जो मूव करते वक्त भी ऐसा लगे जैसे सो रही है. Too full for sound and foam. और उस टाइड में बहुत ज़्यादा एनर्जी हो लेकिन साउंड ना हो और उसमें फोम ना हो, right? So, this is what the poet wanted. This kind of a tide should have been there. When that which drew from out the boundless deep turns again home. Now, these two lines are very important for us to understand. जब वो टाइड आए, देखो पानी को, उस वाटर को कंपेयर किया गया है डेथ से, रिवर को कंपेयर किया गया है डेथ से। तो जाहिर है अगर रिवर जो है वो डेथ है, तो अब डेथ के लिए ले जाने के लिए जो टाइड विल कम, जस्ट बिकॉज टाइड विल कम लाइक अ फ्लड एंड देन टेक अवे that person towards the heaven, just because that river has been compared or has been metaphorically referred to as death. So here the poet is saying that he wants such a tide जिसमें एक खामोशी हो and उसके अंदर आवाज ना हो. When that which drew from out the boundless deep, जब वो आए, कहाँ से आए? Boundless deep में से. Boundless का मतलब है यहाँ पर immortal. Immortal means अमर या eternal या perpetual, forever, जो कभी ख़त्म नहीं हो सकता. मतलब वो जब लहरें अराइज हो, एंड अकॉर्डिंग टू द पोएट वो लहरें राइज होंगी कहाँ से? इमॉर्टल डेप्थ से. इमॉर्टल डेप्थ मतलब एक ऐसी गहराई से जिसका कोई एंड नहीं है उस गहराई का. ऐसी गहराई से राइज होंगी वो लहरें. एंड इमॉर्टल डेप्थ का सेंस है फ्रॉम द हेवन द टाइड विल कम, because heaven is the place where no one dies and remains alive forever, eternally. That is, everyone is immortal in life after death. So, वो लहरें जब आए वहाँ से ले जाने के लिए हमें दोबारा घर की तरफ, किस घर की तरफ? इटर्नल घर की तरफ, जो असल में जो हमारा घर है, जहाँ से कभी वापस नहीं आना, उस घर की तरफ ले जाने के लिए जब लहरें आए तो लहरें खामोश हो. एंड फोम का मतलब होता है झाग, उनमें ना तो झाग हो ना साउंड हो. सो दिस वॉज द सेकेंड स्टैंजा. नाउ द थर्ड स्टैंजा. Twilight and evening bell, and after that the dark, and may there be no sadness of farewell when I embark. So in the third stanza as well, the poet has used metaphor to represent his old age and then his death. Twilight is half light, and it is that particular time of the day when the sun has already set and darkness begins to spread all over. And evening bell is referring to the death bell or knell. So the poet means to say that twilight or half light or old age is just a signal that the death bell has already been rung. And after that the dark. तो जैसे शाम के बाद रात आती है, वैसे ही ज़िंदगी की शाम हो जाने के बाद, ज़िंदगी की शाम मतलब ओल्ड एज के बाद, जब ज़िंदगी ढल जाती है, ओल्ड एज आ जाती है, ज़िंदगी का ढल जाना मतलब शाम हो जाना, तो ओल्ड एज के बाद रात आती है. दैट मीन्स डेथ. एंड मे देयर बी नो सैडनेस ऑफ फेयरवेल व्हेन आई embark. So the word may over here is simply referring that the poet has made a wish, or he has requested to his loved ones not to cry over his death, but rather give him a happy farewell. He is saying that when he says goodbye to them, then all his relatives, friends, and family members should be happy about it, and they should not be giving him a sorrowful and a lamenting farewell. When I embark. So, what is embark? Embark means to get on the ship. And why has the poet used the word embark? Because the poet had used a river metaphorically to stand for death. तो अगर river death के लिए stand हो रहा है, इसका मतलब river वो source है जो poet को heaven तक लेकर के जाएगा. और river की journey के लिए ship का इस्तेमाल किया जाता है. और इसीलिए यहाँ पर poet ने कहा है when I get on the ship. इसका मतलब when I get ready for my journey towards the heaven. At that point of time, I do not want my friends and relatives and loved ones to give me a sorrowful farewell. I want them to give me a cheerful farewell. So, this is how the third stanza comes to an end. For though from out our bourne of time and place the flood may bear me far, I hope to see my pilot face to face when I have crossed the bar. So the poet is saying that although he knows it very well that he will be taken out of the foundation of time and place that exist on the earth, and he will be taken away towards the heaven by the flood, that means by the water of the river. So he's saying that he will be taken away. The flood may bear me far, the flood may take me away far, that is towards the heaven, by taking me out of the foundations or the limitations of time and place that exist on the earth. Why? Because we have got a limited span of life, limited amount of time to live on the earth. One day we will die. And secondly, the place that we have got to live on the earth is also limited, because earth is just a planet and it has got a limited space. So time and place are very limited here. And he will be taken out of that foundation. But he is happy just because he is expecting to meet his pilot. Pilot is God, his driver of the universe, that is God. I hope to see my pilot, that means I hope to meet my God face to face. After death, I will get the opportunity to get to see my God when I have crossed the bar. Means when he has crossed the sandbar, just because he had metaphorically used sandbar as an obstruction, as something that should be crossed to move from life towards the death, and death was being referred to as river. So that river was standing for death, and that's why that river was a source for carrying him towards the heaven, and that's why to begin his journey towards the heaven, he had used this term, when I embark. That means when he will get on the ship to begin his journey towards the heaven. So there shouldn't be any mourning. And that's why he's saying that flood will take him away, right? So now let us see very quickly the figures of speech that have been used, because this poem is just full of literary devices. So we see here, and one clear call for me, the second line of the poem has got alliteration, because we see that there is a repetition of the same sound, a consonant letter, that is C, clear and call. So C is a letter that pronounces a consonant sound, and then call, C again is that particular letter which gives a consonant sound. So C and C are being repeated in the beginning of the two words, and that's why it is called alliteration. So alliteration is a figure of speech where it happens that in just one line, in a single line, it happens that there is a usage of more than one word, that is two or three such words that have got the same first letter, and that first letter which is repeating, it should also be of the consonant sound. So here, clear call. And then we see other figures of speech that have been used in this poem. So we see in the second stanza, the very first line, but such a tide as moving seems asleep. Here personification has been used, and the tide has been personified, because we see that such a tide as moving seems asleep. It means ऐसा टाइड जो ऐसे मूव करे, ऐसा लगे कि वो सो रहा है, इतनी खामोशी हो उस टाइड में. So, sona is a characteristic of a person, and this characteristic has been applied here on the tide, and that's why we can say that it has been personified, because the word which uses the characteristics of a person, that for that particular word it is said that it has been personified. For that particular thing, it is said that it has been personified. So since for tide over here we see that it has been written that it should be like it is sleeping. So sleeping is a characteristic of a person, and that's why here tide has been personified. Then we go ahead and we see other figures of speech that have been used in this poem. So we see enchantment is there. What is enchantment? I hope to see my pilot face to face. This is not a complete statement. Still, the statement has been broken to complete it in the next line or the following line. And when it happens that one statement is completed not in a single line, but then it is followed in the next line to get completed, it is called enchantment. So here we see that figure of speech as well. Metaphor, as far as metaphor is concerned, it has been used all over the poem. In almost every line, metaphor has been used. And then there is imagery as well, and all. So here we get to see that the poet has metaphorically used the bar to represent that this is that last obstruction or that last moment of his life, which has to be crossed to move towards the river or to move towards the death, because river is standing for death. And for that he has to, since a river is that source which will carry him towards his pilot or god. So the journey of river is generally done through ship, and that's why the poet is imagining, it is imagery, the poet is imagining that since river is going to take him towards his god, there should be a ship which will carry him towards God in that river. So he's saying, when I get on the ship to start my journey towards the heaven, he doesn't want any loved one to cry over his death. And he has very beautifully mentioned that he is happy about facing death, just because he is not at all sorrowful or sad to think that life will come to an end. He is not thinking about life anymore, just because he has accepted life as getting over for himself, and he is accepting that he has already lived his life, and that he has entered that particular phase of life when it is only half lit and half is faded. So he has accepted that death is imminent, and he should get happy to embrace it with a welcoming and an elated heart, instead of being sad about it. Just because now he should give up on life and he should start thinking about the life after death. So this is how, when we think, then we come to this conclusion that Christianity, or the teachings, the preachings, that are there in Christianity, that have become a great theme in this poem. So the themes that are very prominently uh, being shown here in the poem are uh, acceptance of death, which is something rare, just because nobody accepts death willfully or happily. So acceptance of death, and then uh, great faith in God, and to be a true Christian by accepting death with this heart, that he is going to accept death so that he can meet his God, meet his pilot, meet his driver, the driver of the universe. So when he has crossed the bar, and for that deliberately the poet has used the word crossed. This is spelling CROST instead of crossed, that normal English word. So here we see that the poet has simply tried to say that he, being at the age of 80, he has accepted his death. He knows it very well that the time has come when he cannot escape death, and very soon he will have to confront it. Then why to confront it sadly? But he should get ready to face it happily, just because he thinks that he has already lived that part of life which he has enjoyed and which he wanted to live, and now it's time to accept death so that he can also meet his God, and he can head towards the life after death, which is immortal and which is forever, which is eternal, and which is a true life. And for that he makes a request to his loved ones not to cry over his death, and rather give him a good and a happy farewell. So this is how this poem is rich in literary devices, and it's a very beautiful poem, and very beautifully it is giving the themes that I just told you. So I hope you understood the poem. Thank you so much for watching.